Right. So to your point, I do agree with you that capitalism can be just as bad as socialism. Now, but I can't remember where I saw this quote. It says socialism does not work because human beings love to own property. And because of that exact reason, that is why socialist regimes tend to use force and tyranny, to implement their policies. It is ingrained in us to want to own property. And so now imagine you telling me that I can't own as much as I want to, or you are trying to place a cap on the amount of money I can earn or the amount of property I could buy. The government, that type of government would need to be tyrannical, to enforce those regulations. I am pro-capitalism and I'm pro-free markets, but I'll tell you that capitalism hasn't worked in Africa for many reasons. I actually just did a short YouTube video yesterday about this, but let me just recount what I said. To me, I think the reason capitalism hasn't worked in Africa is because Africa is over-regulated. The typical African country has, a plethora of regulations that do not allow for private enterprise to thrive. If you want to do very simple things, very basic things, usually it involves a whole lot of red tape. You have to go from one office to another office, from one office to another office. And in doing that, it slows down the process. And most times, if you want to fast track your own process, you have to bribe some people, and that only caters to the rich and wealthy. So for a young entrepreneur, let's say like me, if I want to do those things and I don't have the money to bribe somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, I'll be stuck. Whereas the person who has enormous amount of money can game the system, So I think overregulation is a bane to the growth of capitalism in Africa. Another reason would be cronyism. Most African countries, if you think about it, for most African countries, there is this alliance between the business class and the political class. Usually, the business class tend to be the relatives or the friends or the cronies of the political class. And based on that alliance, they tend to have contracts, they get to have concessions from the government that the average citizen cannot get. So I think, and also you earlier in the show, you talked about the lack of institutions. Most African countries just don't have credible, strong institutions that would allow for the thriving of the private sector, that will allow for the thriving of capitalism. So I think it's a complicated issue as regards why capitalism hasn't worked in Africa. But regardless, I am pro capitalism and pro free market, and I would hope that Africa can work on these limitations and allow for the thriving of the private sector.
Let me just cap in there for a while. I really want to agree on your points, and I just want to say that the reason why we have a lot of regulations in Africa, it's and the reason why capitalism is not really working the way we think it should work, like Tony and Omelo describes as Afri-capitalism, it's a political reason. You know why? Power conservation.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of governments that are implementing most of these regulations so as to keep the population under their control, so they don't lose power to some certain people. So they don't lose the power to some certain people. And in that way, they are always in charge. And they make sure they stay into power as long as they can. So I think the failure of capitalism in Africa has to do with, a political decision too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Absolutely. Now, let me try to still man a case for socialism.